About time for another Coach Life. Pardon the noise. Enjoy the candle. Mom Dukes hit me with some game. I imagine I was around 29 and 30. And we were talking about aging. And she was like, "Oh God, I hated my 20s. I said, "What? Why?" She said, it's like one big identity crisis. Your 20s, it's like high stakes trying to figure out who you are. By the time you get to your 30s, you kind of know who you are. So then you can just do the life stuff. And I thought, wow, this is truth. Like as she said it, I'm pretty sure I said this in a previous Coach Life, but it was so far back that it's worth revisiting. Also, I had that same conversation with someone this weekend, I think, maybe Friday. And it illuminated a lot for them, the same way it did for me. It's one of those things where, let's say you're a teenager. Let's say you're early teens, 15, 16. You have an intuitive sense of life, which is by far your cleanest measure. And then you have a cerebral sense of life, which can get very messy very fast. And then you have a spiritual sense, which kind of has to do a dance with the both. So you take what you learn, you need to continue to experience new experiences. So it's not like you can just take what you learn and distill it. You have to continuously add and feed. It's like, okay, I ate today, so I'm never going to eat again. It doesn't work that way. You have to continue to eat. Some of us. And so your 20s, your teens are like the preamble to your 20s. And I would like the 20s to be the preamble to the 30s, but it's not. The 20s is where there are all these clear markers in society which say, oh, it's time now, on so many things. If you're a woman, 20s, oh, it's time to have a kid. If you're a man, 20s, oh, it's time to get serious about your job or whatever. You want to have a woman, don't you? Whatever, wherever you fall in the spectrum. The point is, 20s is time for you to get serious about life, which is ironic, because also the 20s where you're going to be a complete maniac. It's the best time to do it. You can't really do it in your teens, you can, but there's a lot of plausibility issues if you're doing it in your teens. If you do it in your 20s, you're fully responsible for yourself, legally, consciously. It's a big deal. Like you turn 21, it's like, okay, everything you hated, mom, dad, uncle, whatever, for everything you, I can't wait till 21, go for it. Put those bright ideas to the test. Now, if you had a decent mentor in your life, it's not that dramatic, but I was listening to this woman last night. She was getting interviewed, and white woman, and she said, I had the perfect upbringing. I wasn't sheltered. My parents were great people. I got a good job. I had a fun car. I was making a lot of money. I was living in a great place. I was on the surface happy. And she said, deep down, I was miserable. It felt like nothing. It felt like it didn't matter. You know why? Because it didn't. You see, when you shelter someone or you have perfectly placed steps laid out for them, they don't get to experience life. They don't feel. You got to go through some stuff to feel. You don't appreciate the sun without the darkness. You don't appreciate quiet without the noise. So people think they can just accumulate wealth and shelter their children and send them to the best schools, and that's going to be a recipe for success. What happens when they realize there's a whole nother world out there, like the Buddha, and that they're disconnected from it? You see, now that we have a collective sense of oneness that is alive and clicking, it is actually unhealthy to be sheltered from reality. We need to know so that we can make informed decisions. We need to experience so that we can empathize. I witnessed this in education and I'm completely guilty. Like, don't let me sit here pretending like I'm preaching, but this is what happened. First, I was a substitute teacher only because I needed to coach. And in New York City, in order to coach, you needed a substitute teacher's license at the time. Now, in order to coach, you need a teacher's license, which makes no sense because what makes a good teacher does not make a good coach, and what makes a good coach does not make a teacher. But this is what they did to be litigious so they could screen out a lot of folks, same way they did with the vaccines, yada, yada, yada. My point is, I started off as a coach, then I shifted into deaning. And every time a teacher sent me a student, it told me something about their classroom management. Sometimes I would talk to the student, quick talk, boom, 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 send them right back to class. Well, as fate shall have it, I was teaching English the last 3-4 years on the vineyard, and I finally saw, oh my God, teaching is so much different than I thought. And I was in the building. I was in proximity. I was teaching some classes. But until you're teaching full time, you have no idea what you're doing. So I had to apologize to every teacher that I ever deamed with. Tough gig. I think you understand the point. I don't know the name, but Coachlife.